I had just returned from a long week of work and, after hours of scrolling through endless options, I thought booking an Airbnb would be the perfect way to unwind. It was supposed to be a quiet weekend getaway. No distractions, just me, alone in a cozy place to rest. My name's Daniel, by the way, and I had never expected anything out of the ordinary to happen during what was supposed to be a relaxing retreat. I found a listing called Quiet Cabin in the Woods about 2 hours outside of town. The pictures looked perfect, rustic, clean, and surrounded by nature. The host, Robert, seemed friendly in his profile. He mentioned that the cabin was tucked away for those looking for peace, but I thought nothing of it. Who would? It was just a secluded cabin in the middle of nowhere. The price was cheap for the location, and I booked it. When I arrived, the cabin appeared exactly as described, except there was an eerie stillness in the air, almost as if the forest itself was holding its breath. I figured it was just the isolation, and I shrugged it off. The sun was setting, casting a golden hue over the woods. I didn't think much of the feeling of being watched, at least not yet. As I stepped into the cabin, the musty scent of old wood filled the air. It was beautiful in its own way, and I was eager to explore. But as I walked into the living room, I noticed something strange. A collection of old, dusty pictures hanging on the walls. They were all of people I didn't recognize, with faces frozen in moments of tense, forced smiles. The images seemed out of place for a quiet cabin. They felt wrong, like the eyes were following me. I decided to text Robert, just to confirm everything was all right. I typed out a message asking if there was anything I needed to know, any quirks of the cabin that I should be aware of. The response came almost immediately. Hope you're enjoying your stay. Just be sure to lock the doors tonight. The woods can get unsettling. I chuckled at the message. What did he mean by unsettling? But the feeling of unease began to creep in, especially when I noticed how quiet it had gotten. No wind, no rustling leaves, not even the sound of birds. As the night drew in, I heard a strange noise outside. Footsteps, slow and deliberate. My heart started to race. I convinced myself it was just an animal. But then I heard something else. A knock at the door. A soft, deliberate knock. It wasn't Robert. I hadn't seen anyone on the property since I arrived. I looked through the peephole. Nothing. The moonlight revealed only the dense, dark woods. My hand hesitated over the door handle. What was going on? I opened the door, but there was no one there. The quiet returned, but it felt even deeper now, like something was waiting. I checked the locks again and then bolted the door shut. But I wasn't alone anymore. I couldn't shake the feeling that something was terribly wrong. The knock on the door, the silence outside, and the uneasy tension in the air. It didn't feel like a simple coincidence. I tried to distract myself by unpacking and settling in, but the discomfort clung to me like a second skin. The cabin's walls seemed to be closing in, the creaks and groans of the old wood only amplifying the growing dread. I tried to convince myself that I was just overthinking it, but every little noise felt amplified in the stillness. I turned on the TV to drown out the silence, but as the screen flickered to life, the room seemed even darker, colder. Then, out of nowhere, I heard it again, a faint buzzing sound. My heart skipped a beat. It was coming from the front door. I froze, my eyes darting to the doorframe. The doorbell. A cold chill ran down my spine. I hadn't heard anyone approach, but the buzzing continued, low and persistent. I didn't want to answer it. I didn't want to know what was on the other side of that door. I grabbed my phone and texted Robert again, my fingers shaking. Did you send someone to the cabin? There's someone at the door. No one is here, but the doorbell is ringing. He responded quickly, more so than I expected. No one should be there. Are you sure? I read the message twice, trying to make sense of it. Robert's text gave me no comfort. If no one was supposed to be here, why was the doorbell ringing? I didn't want to look through the peephole again. Something felt so wrong about it all. But I had to know. Slowly, I made my way to the door, pressing my eye to the peephole, my breath shallow. The moonlight bathed the porch in an eerie glow, and there it was, standing just beyond the threshold. A figure, tall, lanky, with an almost unnerving stillness. I couldn't make out their face, but I could see the outline of a hood, the shadow of long, thin arms hanging loosely by their sides. I held my breath, praying they'd leave, but they didn't. They stood there for what felt like an eternity, unmoving. Then, without a sound, they started to turn, slowly, as if they were aware of me watching. I stepped back, trying to hide in the shadows of the cabin, my heart pounding in my chest. It wasn't until I heard the faintest sound, a whisper, that I realized they weren't alone. Two other figures stepped out of the darkened woods, their forms barely visible in the dim light. They moved in unison, as if drawn to the cabin. A wave of terror crashed over me. I backed away from the door, but something stopped me. The door creaked open on its own. I had locked it. I could hear the faint sound of footsteps approaching the threshold, the air thick with the scent of damp earth. My mind raced. What did they want? And why was the door opening on its own? I turned and ran, not knowing where I was going, but I had to get away. This was no longer just a strange encounter. It felt like I was in the middle of something much darker. And then, in the silence of the woods, I heard a voice, clear and calm. "Don't run, Daniel. You can't escape us." I didn't stop running. My breath came in sharp gasps as my feet pounded against the uneven forest floor. The trees were thick around me, their branches creaking and swaying as if the woods themselves were alive, watching, waiting. Every step I took felt like it was pulling me deeper into the darkness, and I knew that if I looked back, I'd see them. I didn't dare. I had to make it to the road, the car. I told myself if I could just reach my car, I would drive out of there and never look back. My mind was screaming at me to stay calm, but the terror was overwhelming. I couldn't shake the voice. "Don't run, Daniel. You can't escape us." It echoed in my head like a cruel mantra. I glanced back once, just for a second. The figures were behind me, emerging from the woods like shadows in the fog, impossibly fast and silent. Their elongated limbs and hooded faces sent a cold shiver down my spine. They weren't just following me. They were hunting me. I stumbled and fell, my hands scraping against the rough ground. The fall knocked the wind out of me, and for a moment, I just lay there, gasping for air. My eyes darted around, trying to find a way out. There was no sound except for my heavy breathing and the distant rustling of trees. I was alone, but I wasn't. A shadow moved beside me, and I looked up. The figure from the cabin, the one who had been standing at the door, was standing over me. I could barely make out their features beneath the hood, but I felt their gaze pierce through me, as if they could see everything inside of me. I tried to crawl backward, but my body refused to move. My legs felt like stone, my heart pounding in my chest like a drum. It leaned closer, and in a voice as cold as ice, it whispered, "You shouldn't have come here." I couldn't speak, couldn't breathe. My body was frozen with fear. From behind me, I heard the soft thud of footsteps. The other two figures had caught up. They encircled me, their movements fluid and unnatural, like they were in no hurry. They were enjoying this. I felt the air grow colder, the night pressing in closer around me. The woods were no longer silent. There was something else out there, something deeper in the forest. The trees seemed to shift, the shadows twisting in ways that didn't make sense. It was as if the forest itself was alive, feeding off the fear in the air. The figure above me reached down, a long, pale hand grasping my wrist. The touch was ice cold, sending a jolt of panic through me. I tried to pull away, but its grip tightened, its fingers digging into my skin. "You can't run from what's already found you," it said, its voice a rasping whisper. In that moment, I realized something. The cabin wasn't just a place to rest. It was a trap, a place to lure people in. The people in the pictures, the unsettling message from Robert, this wasn't just an ordinary Airbnb. I had walked into something far darker than I could ever have imagined. And then, a chilling thought struck me. I wasn't the first to make this mistake. The figures stepped back as a new presence emerged from the woods. This one was different. A tall man with sharp features, wearing an old-fashioned suit, his eyes gleaming with malice. He looked like he had stepped out of a nightmare. "You've been chosen," he said, his voice smooth and haunting. "There's no escaping now." I tried to scream, but no sound came. The world around me began to blur, the trees, the figures, and the cabin itself fading into a blackness so complete it swallowed everything. And then, just as suddenly, the darkness was gone. I was back in the cabin, sitting on the floor, my hands trembling. The room was eerily silent again, but the shadows in the corners of the room seemed to move. I looked around, my mind racing, trying to make sense of what had just happened. Had it been a dream? No, I knew it hadn't. I stood up shakily and rushed to the door, but when I tried to open it, it wouldn't budge. I turned around, my breath catching in my throat. There, in the corner of the room, was the picture of the three figures. And now there was a fourth figure standing beside them, me. I stared at the picture. My heart stopped. There I was, standing in the corner of the photo, alongside the three figures I had just seen in the woods. My face was pale, expressionless, just like the others. But how? How was this possible? I hadn't been in the picture before, had I? The room seemed to close in on me. I stumbled backward, my body shaking, and I forced myself to look away. My mind couldn't wrap around what was happening. The silence was suffocating, the air heavy with something I couldn't quite place. The door that had locked behind me was still shut tight. I felt trapped. I needed to get out. I pulled at the door handle, but it wouldn't budge. Panic started to rise, and I slammed my shoulder against the door, again and again. It wouldn't open. I collapsed onto the floor, gasping for air, my heart racing. Sweat poured down my face as I scrambled to my feet and ran toward the window. I tried to pry it open, but it was sealed shut, as though the cabin itself didn't want me to leave. That's when I heard it, the soft tapping, almost like fingernails on wood, coming from the other side of the room. I froze. The sound was faint, but it was unmistakable. It was like someone or something was trying to get in. I turned, my eyes searching the room, scanning every inch of the cabin, every corner. There was nothing, just the shadows moving as if they had a life of their own. Then, without warning, I heard a voice, low and chilling. "It's time, Daniel." I whipped around, but there was no one there. The voice seemed to echo around the cabin, coming from all directions. The air grew heavier, thicker, as if something was pressing down on me. I felt suffocated. The room was closing in. I backed away, trying to find a way out, but the walls felt like they were pressing toward me. The voice came again, clearer this time, as if standing right behind me. "You've crossed the line." The shadows in the room seemed to twist and writhe, pulling together in the center. I could hear them now, whispers, countless whispers, voices overlapping and growing louder with each passing second. It was like the very walls were alive, filled with the remnants of everyone who had stayed here before me, trapped in this place. A figure stepped out from the darkness, its shape emerging from the swirling shadows. It was the man from the woods, the one in the old-fashioned suit. He was smiling, but it wasn't a kind smile. It was cold, empty, predatory. "You were chosen long ago," he said, his voice smooth, almost soothing, but with an edge that made my skin crawl. "We all were. This place doesn't let go. You don't get to leave until you've been claimed." I backed away, my legs trembling beneath me. What do you want from me?" I gasped, my voice shaking. His smile widened. "It's not what we want. It's what you've given. Every person who stays here, every soul that is drawn into the woods, is taken, just as you will be. In time, you'll forget you were ever anything but a part of this place." "No!" I screamed. "I'll leave. I'm not staying." But the man's eyes glinted with something dark, something ancient. He tilted his head, as if savoring my terror. "You already are, Daniel. You already are." The cabin felt colder. The shadows seemed to reach out, grasping at me. I could feel them pulling at my limbs, tugging me toward the center of the room. I tried to fight it, but it was no use. The more I struggled, the tighter their grip became. And then the world seemed to shift. The room, the cabin, the woods outside, they all blurred together. The darkness consumed everything. I woke up on the cold floor of the cabin, gasping for breath. It felt like I had just been dragged out of some endless nightmare. But as I sat up, I realized something was wrong. The pictures on the walls had changed. They weren't just old, dusty photos anymore. They were new. And in each photo, I was there, standing in place of one of the figures. I wasn't a guest anymore. I had become part of the story, a piece of the darkness that would never let go. And as I looked at the pictures, I realized the truth. No one ever really leaves this place. Once you've stepped inside, you're a part of it, forever. And when the next guest arrives, they'll find me too, waiting in the shadows. It wasn't supposed to end like this. Couldn't have. I had survived, hadn't I? I had been through the terror, the darkness, the whispers, and the shadows, but I was still here, alive, or at least I thought I was. But now everything felt wrong. The air was thick and oppressive, and I felt a deep chill settling in my bones. I tried to shake the feeling, but it wouldn't go away. My body moved, but it felt like I was on autopilot, like I was being pulled by strings, tethered to something much darker than I could comprehend. I stood up slowly, my eyes drifting back to the pictures on the wall. They had changed just as I feared. But it wasn't just my face that had been added. There were more, dozens of new faces, some familiar, some not. Each person, just like me, had been pulled into the cycle. All of them looked the same, hollow, empty, lifeless. I turned away from the wall, my head spinning. I needed to escape. The door. I had to get out. My hands fumbled for the handle, but it was no use. It felt as though the door itself was mocking me, refusing to budge. No matter how hard I pulled, no matter how much force I used, it remained sealed shut. "Don't bother," a voice said, and I froze. It was him again, the man in the suit. His voice was calm, too calm. His figure materialized out of the darkness in the corner of the room, his sharp features illuminated by the flickering light of the dying fire. His smile was still there, cruel and knowing. "You can't leave," he continued, his voice like smooth glass, cold and unyielding. "No one ever does. Not really." I turned, a desperate plea forming in my chest. "What do you want from me? What is this place? Why won't it let me go?" He stepped closer, his presence suffocating, pressing against me with an invisible weight. "This place is a crossroads, Daniel. Point of no return. Every soul that comes here becomes part of the story, part of the cycle. You're a piece now, and once you've joined, there's no escaping it." "But I haven't joined anything," I cried. "I'm not like them. I'm still me." He chuckled softly, the sound sending a shiver down my spine. "You're more like them than you realize. All it takes is time. You'll see." I wanted to scream, to fight, but my body felt like it was betraying me. Every movement was sluggish, as if my limbs were moving through water. My thoughts were clouded, like the fog outside the cabin, thick and inescapable. My vision blurred, and the world seemed to tilt. Then it hit me. The door wasn't locked because it couldn't be opened. It was locked because I couldn't leave. Not physically, not mentally. The door was locked from the inside, and I was the one who had done it. I had trapped myself here. As I realized this, the man's smile widened. His eyes gleamed with satisfaction. "You see, Daniel, it's always been you. Always." He stepped closer, his hand reaching toward my face. I backed away, but there was nowhere to go. The walls seemed to close in on me, the shadows growing taller, more oppressive. The whispers started again, but this time, they weren't just in my head. They were around me, closing in like a horde of invisible voices. "You will forget," he whispered, his breath cold against my ear. "In time, you will forget everything. Your life, your name, your memories, all of it. And you will become part of the story, a part of the cabin." I wanted to scream, but my voice wouldn't come. My hands trembled as I pressed them to my temples, trying to hold on to something, anything. But the memories were slipping away, like sand through my fingers. They were fading. My thoughts, my identity were being erased piece by piece. I looked around in a panic, desperate for something that would anchor me. And then I saw it, the picture on the wall. My picture. The one where I had been standing with the others, my face pale, my expression hollow. But it was different now. There was a new figure standing next to me. A young woman with blonde hair and wide, frightened eyes. She looked just as I had when I first arrived. Terrified, confused, lost. I didn't have time to process it. The room spun, the walls shook, and everything went dark. When I awoke, I was no longer on the floor of the cabin. I was standing in front of the door that had never opened. It was open now. I could see the woods beyond, the dark trees stretching out into the night, the quiet of the forest swallowing the cabin whole. I stepped outside, unsure if I was dreaming or awake. But the moment my feet hit the ground, I knew one thing for sure. I wasn't free. I could feel it in my bones. The cycle had already begun again, and there was no escape. The air outside was cold, biting, and thick with the scent of damp earth and pine. I could hear nothing but the whispering wind, but it wasn't the quiet I had expected. It was oppressive, like the trees themselves were alive, their branches reaching toward me, as if urging me to come deeper into the woods. I stood frozen, staring into the darkness, my heart pounding in my chest. The door behind me was now wide open, but the feeling of being watched didn't go away. It intensified. I could feel the weight of eyes upon me, unseen, just beyond the trees. Something wasn't right. I took a tentative step forward, the sound of my footsteps too loud in the silence. The cabin stood behind me like a twisted memory, its silhouette barely visible in the growing fog. It wasn't the same place it had been when I first arrived. Now it felt like an anchor, pulling me back, keeping me tied to this nightmare. I turned back, hoping to make sense of it, but as soon as I did, I saw something that froze my blood. The man in the suit was standing at the doorway, watching me. His face was more grotesque than before, like something that didn't belong in the world. His eyes burned with malice, and his smile was twisted, stretched unnaturally wide. "You thought you were free," he said, his voice a low rasp. "But you're never truly free once you've entered. The forest owns you now. The cabin owns you." His words sunk in, and the dread I had felt before intensified into something far worse. I could feel my stomach drop. I was trapped, not just by the cabin but by the very land itself. My body was tethered to this place, and I had no idea how or why. The cycle had started again, whether I liked it or not. I turned, desperate to get away, to run. But the forest wasn't welcoming. It was suffocating, the trees pressing closer as if they were alive, bending in toward me. The fog thickened, swirling around my legs. The more I moved, the heavier the air seemed to become, like invisible hands pushing me back toward the cabin. I pushed through the mist, but something was watching me. I could feel it, them. The shadows that had followed me before now felt like part of the landscape itself. They were not just figures in the woods. They were part of the forest. The whispers grew louder, echoing through the trees. I tried to block them out, but their voices were too clear, too real. "You'll never escape. You'll never leave." I stumbled forward, my legs weak from fear, the cold seeping into my bones. I had to get away. I had to escape. But every direction I turned seemed to lead me deeper into the darkness. The more I ran, the further I felt from the real world, the place I once knew. The ground underfoot began to change, the dirt turning to gravel, then to stone. My surroundings twisted, the trees thinning and shifting into a dark, barren clearing. And then I saw it, the cabin. It was back in front of me, standing in the middle of the clearing, untouched by time. The door creaked open, and I felt the familiar pull, an invisible force drawing me back inside. "No!" I screamed, but it was no use. My feet moved against my will, dragging me toward it. I tried to resist, but something in the air was heavier now. I couldn't breathe. It was suffocating, like the very forest itself was feeding off my fear. The trees swayed around me, but their movements were unnaturally slow. I could see them closing in. They were watching, with a final, desperate attempt I wrenched my body away from the pull and ran. My feet thudded against the stone and dirt as I sprinted. The fog, the whispers, and the shadows all combined into a deafening crescendo that shook my mind. Then suddenly, everything stopped. The forest went silent. I froze, terrified that I had run into something worse than the cabin. My breath caught in my throat as I turned around to see where the sounds had gone. Nothing. The clearing was empty, the cabin gone. For a brief moment, I thought I might have made it. I thought I had escaped. I stood in the eerie stillness, my heart thudding in my chest. But that was when I noticed it. Figure just standing there. It was the woman, the one from the picture, the one who had been added to the wall after me. She was standing in the clearing, her wide, terrified eyes locked on mine. Her hair was disheveled, her clothes torn. Her lips moved, but no sound came out. She pointed toward the ground, and I followed her finger. There, at my feet, was something buried beneath the soil. A hand, pale and cold. I bent down to touch it, but as soon as I did, the ground gave way. I fell, tumbling through the earth as it opened up beneath me. My screams were swallowed by the darkness. And then I was back in the cabin, back in the nightmare, and there was no way out. I woke with a jolt, gasping for air as though I had been drowning. My body ached all over, and I could still feel the cold weight of the earth pressing against me. But I wasn't buried. I wasn't falling anymore. I was back in the cabin, sitting on the floor, my hands trembling as I reached up to touch my face. The room was the same, but it felt different, heavier, more oppressive. The shadows no longer danced along the walls. They clung to them, seeping into the very fabric of the cabin. I could hear whispers again, but this time they weren't just distant murmurs. They were close, as though they were in the very air around me, swirling with each breath I took. I stood up, my legs weak, but something deep inside me told me not to move. Every instinct screamed at me to run, but I already knew what would happen if I did. I looked around, hoping for something to offer an explanation, some kind of clue as to how I had ended up back here. My eyes fell on the wall. The pictures. They were no longer just unsettling. They were alive. I could see them changing, shifting in front of me, the faces of the people staring out with those hollow, lifeless eyes. Then there it was, my face once again. But this time the expression wasn't blank. I was smiling. I stumbled back, my heart racing. I wasn't smiling. I hadn't been smiling in any of the other pictures. But there I was, grinning in that photo. I had joined them. I felt the weight of that realization hit me like a ton of bricks. The whispers grew louder, now chanting my name, calling me. I wasn't just a visitor anymore. I had become a part of it. A part of the cabin, the woods, the never-ending cycle. No, I whispered to myself. No, no, no. The room seemed to spin, and the walls began to close in again just like before. The door, the one that had once been open, was now shut tight. The man in the suit, the one who had haunted me from the beginning, stood in the doorway once more, his smile colder than ever. "It's over, Daniel," he said, his voice smooth, inevitable. "You are part of this place now, just like the others before you, just like the others who will come after." I wanted to scream, to fight, but my voice was gone. My limbs were frozen. I was nothing more than a ghost in my own body, trapped in this cursed place. I tried to run again, but it was pointless. The door wouldn't open, and the shadows reached out to drag me back. I could feel their cold fingers tightening around my throat, pulling me toward them. The whispers continued to rise in a frenzy, filling my mind with the broken, desperate voices of everyone who had ever stayed in the cabin. I could hear their stories, their pain, but none of it mattered now. I had become one of them. The pictures on the wall shifted again, and now I saw myself, my face pale and twisted with fear. I was trapped in that frame, stuck in time, just another soul caught in the endless cycle. There was no escaping this place. There never had been. I looked at the man in the suit one last time, his cruel smile still intact. And then, everything went black. When I opened my eyes again, I was standing in front of the cabin. The woods stretched out before me, silent and waiting. But this time, there was no mistaking it. I was no longer free. The cabin had claimed me, and now I would never leave.